For the next piece were the blue fabric pieces here. So these, if you've seen the how to build the staff tutorial, these may look a little familiar. And this is the same technique where basically I took some wire and I created this kind of metal outline, as it were. And then I created these metal, not metal, but these fabric kind of sheaths that are shaped like a petal, where it kind of gathers here at the bottom. Now to attach these, what I actually did is, if you'll remember the metal supports that I added to brace it on the back here, I explicitly didn't glue them down for a reason, and that's because I wanted to take these blue pieces and I wanted to slide them in. So if you look at that, it actually cuts into the flower petal about part of the way through. So the base, where all the fabric is gathered, is glued to the main part of the headdress, but then the blue pieces, I just basically found an open gap in the seam and I slid them down the wires. So now you've got the wires that are acting not only as support for this diamond piece, but they are also acting as the main piece that's keeping these kind of blue feather or blue petal pieces into place. At this point, I had enough of it built that I wanted to paint it. So I used a very similar paint scheme that I did as for the staff. So basically base coating everything in a light brown, then doing another one in an ochre, kind of more of a yellow color. I used Folk Arts Emperor Gold for pretty much any gold surface that you see here, and then use Splendid Gold again to kind of go back through along the edges to kind of pop anything that I wanted to kind of highlight, including some of these edges. I used 3D fabric paint to add a little bit more detail. So along the edge here, you'll see there's a little bit of an extra bump. Along the edge of the star, we've got just a little bit of extra texture going on here. I think I did a little bit on the inner diamond. Again, it's just another way to add more dimension to a design that would otherwise be fairly flat. And it does help catch the edges as well, especially with something that's really metallic. Is obviously the ears. So the ears were definitely interesting. This is my first time really working with fake fur, so definitely a learning curve. So with the ears, there's basically a craft foam base, and as you can probably see from the pictures we got going, basically there's a base, a craft foam base for the fur part, and then there's a craft foam base for the fleshy part. So for the ears, what I did is I went out and I got some fabric that was as close to my wig color as I could find. Originally I had planned on dyeing the fabric, but my dyes didn't come in time. So I had to find an alternative, which was Sharpies. So in essence, what I did is when I cut the fabric, I glued it on. I kind of stitched it together, glued it onto the fabric. Did a lot of trimming. When you're working with fake fur, there will be a lot of trimming. Because in essence, when you're working with fake fur, very much like real hair or like when you're cutting wigs, you don't want to just cut it straight across. What you want to do is kind of brush it apart from the place where you want the seam to be. That's where you make the cut, but then you've got all this extra long hair that you have to deal with. So I actually spent a good long time just trimming the hair, making sure that everything kind of fell where it was supposed to, because it was an unruly mess. I wanted to make sure that like the edges looked okay. So yeah, basically we've got a foam piece for this front chunk here, a foam piece for the chunk in the back. And then I went to town with the Sharpies. I think I used something like 4 different colors. So I've got some dark greens, some light greens, some browns, some oranges. And towards the end I actually got something, I was using an Arda bright green wig as my base, so where the ears were going to connect directly to the wig, that was the part that I was most concerned with, actually making that a smooth transition. Farther out, I didn't care as much if the color didn't match exactly. In fact, if you look at a bunch of the reference pictures for Lulu, she's actually got a little bit of gradation going on there. I basically created the gradation with Sharpie coloring, basically going through each of the fibers, making sure to brush them out so I looked like it made sure that I was getting the proper blending. So once I had the kind of back panel done and the front panel done, Then I was creating the flesh part. So for this one, I got some, oh gosh, I forget what this is called. But it was very kind of smooth but not shiny material. And then I took some of my Copic markers and I basically, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but basically created some of the coloring. Let me see if I can get that a little bit better for you guys. But I created some colorings to kind of create like, oh, this would be the inner ear, this is the outer ear, just so that it wasn't flat fabric, or just one color from the fabric. Then once I had the fleshy part of the ear done, you basically take the back part of the ear, you glue the fabric piece on top, and then you stick the other one on top, and then you just have to make sure when you're gluing the tops together, making sure that you leave enough fluff from the fake fur so that you can kind of crisscross and kind of hide where that seam is. So once the ears were done, what I did is, if you remember, I had the 16 gauge wire kind of running across the top. I had the little loops on the end. So I used the little loops to kind of sandwich it in between where the front flap and the back flap were. So I kind of just put a whole bunch of hot glue in there, shoved the wire in there, and then I also used some glue to kind of connect. This time I didn't use hot glue. This time I used something called Fabri-Tac, which is also a really strong and flexible glue for attaching fabric to other things. And so the reason why I use the Fabri-Tac is it's very slow drying. It actually takes around 24 hours to fully cure. So I knew that if I made like a little bit of a mistake, I could easily recover from it without damaging any of the fibers. So once I had hot glued the kind of ear to the basic loop, for added stability, I went through and Fabri-Tac'd kind of the edges of the fabric down to the main part of the headpiece, as well as kind of the white piece, making sure again to leave enough fluff so that I could hide where the glue had actually appeared. And in the end, it's actually pretty stable. Like, these definitely took some knocks while I was walking around the hotel and on the convention floor. Also doorways. This thing is really, really wide. So I often don't fit through doorways unless I turn slightly to the side. So overall, it's actually pretty stable. It survived sitting in a car. One of the things I did notice that I didn't anticipate originally was I was originally just going to use the 16 gauge wire. I was just going to attach it with some sort of comb, and that was how it was going to stay onto my wig. The problem is, when I had finished styling the wig and I put this on for the first time, it fell off. So to add some stability, there are a couple things that I added. So the first thing is I found a cheap metal headband that was much tighter and was going to conform more closely to my head. So basically at certain points along the 16 gauge wire that kind of runs around, I glued the headband on, and that gave me a little bit more stability. And then I also added some kind of super strength, let me see if I can get that in for you guys. I added some super strength clips so that once I put it onto my head, I basically clip it into the wig, and it's not moving. Like, once this thing is on, it does not move. So between the headband kind of helping to hold the wig in place and hold this onto the wig, and then I've got the 3 clips, the 3 super grip clips, as it were, that I think I actually purchased from Arta. They have additional accessories, such as, wig clips and toupee clips and all that fun sort of stuff. So I put some of those in, I glued that onto the base. So now when I wear it, it's secured tightly onto my head, and we've got some clips to add a little bit of extra stability. So yeah, that